sitting here with Cristina Wood at the table, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself. So it's awesome to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of arrived at this spot with me.
All right. Thank you for having me. Well, I guess my husband and I have been going to church here for a little over a year, going on almost 2 years now. Just trying to get a little bit more involved, trying to meet new people. And I know that you and Chris, my husband, were doing the men's group a lot.
That's how I connected with them. Yeah, I connected with you guys. Yeah. So that was great. The benefit to that was good. Meeting people. That was the whole purpose of the group, was to meet some people that would normally step out and do the normal.
And it worked out well. I'm really excited. Once I heard you were doing this, I kind of almost invited myself on this thing, because when I was younger, I've always wanted to have my own radio show. I would sit there with my little karaoke machine, and I would record myself and songs off the radio, and I record myself introducing songs, just pretending in my own little world that I had my own little show. So this is really cool for me.
The old school mixtape.
Yes.
Making my mixtape.
Yes.
That's a great thing about this, is like anybody can do this now. Like, you just like, Pastor Matt sent me a funny thing. He's like, "Oh, we had a good conversation the other day. Let's do a podcast." Like, it's like people nowadays are just getting out there and sharing things, and it's cool. It's cool to see what it's become and how it's evolved into this. And I think it's helped us learn and communicate a little better. And most people get our information from that. Maybe not the best information, but people get information from this, and it takes away some of the news. And you can also pinpoint opinions, which is, if you don't want to hear from one side or the other, you can actually look for something specifically talking about this. If you want to learn about cooking steaks, like, there's places that just talk about cooking steaks. There's places that are just vegan. There's places that just talk about. So you don't have to take in a mix of media. You can focus yourself better. So I think that's great. When you look at, like, let's like Chris and our example of like meeting up at the men's group, that was a very specific thing, because it got guys involved in something that wouldn't normally mix to that age group sometimes, or other things. How do you see that benefiting?
I think that's wonderful. I think it plays a huge role, not only in the church, but extremely in family life. They say that, and I don't know the direct percentages of this, but when a man is actually leading his family in a godly way, I mean, when a man is going to church, being involved, the rest of the family follows. More so than when it's just the woman in the family that's doing it. Yeah. And it's huge. I think I might have it saved on my phone. It's a huge percentage. They say they say when dad comes to Christ first, 93% of families will follow, versus when it's just mom, it's only 17%, and when it's anybody else, it's 3.5%.
Yeah, I think that's
random
facts. I think it's a big structure on anything that you go through, from church to, I think, reading, to anything that you're doing. I think you look at your dad, and like, that's kind of my superhero, or my example. And coming out of Father's Day, it was interesting to see, kind of the tear-jerk reaction to some of the slides that we put up and some of the quotes, and also seeing how awesome we have dad involvement here and family involvement. But yeah, it's one of the big things that brought our Beyond the Beard men's group to like existence was the fact that a lot of guys go to church, stand around, and wait to go home. They weren't stepping out. They weren't wanting to stick around and talk. And the wives were having their connection with people in the church, and they were talking to people. And we thought, well, let's give them a reason to stay. Let's get a reason to volunteer for something. Not working, but even volunteering to, like you guys, that you hosted a family barbecue at your house. That is what we wanted, was to have you want to invest in it and be involved in it. And I thought it was amazing.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And
to see people step up and do that and want to be involved more was cool. And I always like sitting back at these types of things and seeing who shows up too. Mm-hmm. We've had guys in their 90s, We have had guys, in their 20s. It's a good mix. We have single guys getting married, guys who have been married, guys who are married. It's a great mix. And I think one thing you said that I liked is the percentages go up as dads get involved. A lot of men come to church because their wives are telling them to. Yes. And so you got to give them a reason to want to be here. Men want virtue. Men want, a goal. They want to feel like they're being useful. We definitely don't want to waste time. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. Last thing I want to do is waste time. I want to be with the kids, or I want to relax or rest, and it's a lot of work. So I think that's really cool where that's come from. So
absolutely agree.
I like the idea of getting people involved too. Mm-hmm. So I love the fact that you've come to talk and do this. And I know that, like, the coolest thing about the conversation we had when we were over at your house for dinner was that you were excited to kind of share some opinions and get out there and talk, and I love that. So the goal to this whole podcasting, the goal to the whole at the table thing we did at church was not only to get staff people to talk or to get La Casa people. We wanted to get people who wanted to share things, people who wanted to share their stories or share kind of their insights or questions even, because we don't know everyone in the congregation. There's people with great stories. So I'm excited to do that with people too. I think that's going to be fun. So give me a little background into you. What do you do, family, things like that?
Well, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, a 5-year-old little boy. I work for Grand Canyon University and just help people get enrolled for school.
Getting them in.
Yes. Yeah. So if anybody needs their degree,
I know who you could talk to.
Yeah. But most of all, I'm Christian, and every day trying to read my Bible. I'm not very good at remembering scripture, so don't make me pull out scripture, which is something that I really need to work on personally. But just trying to get involved, trying to really somehow, just to do more.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not good on scripture and memorizing it and throwing them out, per, people sometimes can just list them off. I remember the stories, and that's what kind of keeps me connected. But also, like, I love teaching it. So I love that. That's kind of how I get my glass filled, is I teach, 5th and 6th, and then I'll probably be working with middle school soon. That's how I learn the most of the Bible, and that's how I get my devotional time in, is studying up for what I'm going to teach them, because you don't want to be in front of someone and not know what you're talking about. So that's been my trick. But reading the Bible is something that I've tried to always focus on. And what kind of tricks do you have for getting your scripture time and your devotional time or your prayer time, things like that?
Just writing out a schedule, just making sure you have a set time and doing it every single day on that time, setting reminders on your phone. And that's something that, like I said, I really do struggle with, trying to really make it a priority. And even at the end of the day, when you're exhausted and you want to make an excuse, thinking, I'm just going to go to bed. Trying to, if that's the case for you, try to do it first thing in the morning when you wake up. Mm-hmm. Try to make time somewhere.
Wake up 20 minutes earlier.
Exactly. Wake up 20 minutes earlier. Try to do something. But personally, for me, I can't sit here and say that I've read the entire Bible front to cover, because I have not. I've done Bible studies, and I've read things over and over, which is extremely important. To study the word, and but I have not read it, and that's because primarily I'm also a very new Christian.
Yeah.
So I'm new to my faith, and part of that is, thank God, God found me, and I'm just so thankful. I'm so blessed. I'm saved by grace overall. I'm not somebody who grew up going to church every day. I struggled a lot. I didn't have the easiest upbringing. I didn't have the happiest childhood. So for the longest time in my life, I rejected God and the idea of anything church. But in the end, now that I can see everything looking back, it's I see everything that God has done for me. And it's just amazing. I truly see what it feels like to be whole, because I know what it was like to be broken.
Mm-hmm. It's weird because I grew up Lutheran, and I got through confirmation. And I say I got through confirmation because like that was my mom. Was like I fought every Sunday to go to confirmation class. And I wasn't at La Casa. I was down back home, and it was like 2 kids in my confirmation class. So it was a small group. It wasn't a big focal point, and it was just get them through. And I just think that I just kind of fell off and slowly got back into it. It's weird to know that you're always wanted and loved, and that's what I've always like kind of held on to, even in like bad days and trying to bear things. I was like, well, no matter how bad it is, I'm still wanted and loved. Even beyond the people and the involvement, like God wants you there. Mm-hmm. He wants you to be a part of something. You're always getting drawn back in, and I mean that's awesome that you came into it, and you came into it in your own free will too. You grew up, you looked for it, you wanted to be here.
I wouldn't say that I came into it with my own free will. That's why I say, because if it was up to me, I'm so stubborn and strong-headed. That's why I say I didn't find God. God found me. He chases us every single day. And then I looking back, I find different moments. I could remember different moments in my life where God was, pretty much calling me, and I was just rejecting. Like I just didn't want anything to do with him because I was so angry. Mm-hmm. And I'm always curious about people that grow up from, just grow up constantly, in the church, going to church every single day. I'm curious to find out, like, for them what it's like to not, I guess, I don't want to assume that they never had that fall on your knees moment. What it's like just kind of going through, how do you know, personally, Eddie, that you're, I guess, how do I phrase this? That it's like not just like head knowledge of mm-hmm. Christ, and it's like your whole heart is in it when if somebody just kind of grew up, went through the motions of going to church versus having that moment.
I think with me, I kind of went through the motion. Like mine was going through the motions. It was like you had to go on Sundays, you had to get your time in, and it was almost like you had to have like I always call it like the broken moment, like when Jesus you had to bear the cross. If you didn't bear the cross and have the burden, we never would have got to this point. Like he had to bear that. So some of us have to bear that, and it is weird to think that sometimes people maybe don't, or they just go through the motions and they're good to go to here. But I feel like sometimes you have to bear that, and it feels more real when you're pulled back in and when you have that to look forward to. I had to have like a fall off to get back. Mm-hmm. Like I had to walk away from it a little bit, and it was great coming back here, because even before we moved to Scottsdale, and Stacy was working at La Casa, and I shortly came afterwards. We were going to church back home, but I was always like never involved. I was like kind of behind the scenes, and I sat back a lot and I observed, and slowly like I felt like I had to get more involved here, still a little bit more behind the scenes. But I started going to lunch with Pastor Jeff, and starting talking more to Pastor Matt, and it was like, well, how about you help out with this, or how about, and then it was like, do this, let's get the men involved. So it was like that draw, but I had to go home and pray and think about my prayers and think about that, and then I had to get kind of pushed into this, and I was like, yes, this is where I need to be. Mm-hmm. And it's good to see people forced into their fruits and where they want to be. So where do you see yourself being with this? I mean, you said you're new. So where do you see yourself going with this faith walk and this design?
I have
this design
no
that you have no
clue.
control over, which is even better.
I have no idea. Yeah, I have no control, and I have no idea. It's just all about trust. Yeah. Just trusting God, knowing that He'll place me wherever I need to be. They say your best laid out plans. You can place them all you want. You can make plans, but God laughs.
Yeah.
So
You kind of got to do what he wants you to do.
yeah.
And I always think that that's where I'm stubborn. I try to fight that too. I'm like, I don't need to. I need to. Yeah, maybe that's where I fit. Maybe I don't want to do this time, but that's where I'm fit, and that's where I need to be. And I always like, Pastor Matt will be like, I need you to talk in front of church about this. I'm like, I'm not good at talking in front of church, but I do it, and it works out. And most of the time, I don't sound horrible, and I'm not waving my arms around ridiculous. I think I'm okay sometimes, but it's where we're getting placed. So, you see, being involved in service that you're doing, how does that affect you? Because I know, like, we just kind of threw a barbecue in your face. We're taking over your house, and you're going to meet a bunch of new people, and here we go. So how do you see that? Like, is there anything you want to be serving in or see grow or be involved in or introduce to everybody?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I love meeting new people, talking to people. Sometimes I'm a little awkward, more than sometimes I am. But most of the time, I guess it's just fear. And part, even being on this, podcast, so there's a lot of fear, and you just have to pray that whatever you say, you speak the truth, and trying to let go of that fear of critiques, or in general of possibly saying something that somebody's not going to agree with, possibly saying something that's going to anger somebody. Because at the end of the day, as long as you speak the truth, it's what really matters is...
Conversation doesn't always have to be equal to each other's opinions.
Yeah.
And we're sometimes scared to have a conversation. Before we started this, we had a really good conversation about not having conversation and text messaging and not ignoring, but just not responding back to text. And the conversations have kind of become a challenge, and we forgot how to do it. And we have a very easy excuse to not, because I didn't check my phone. I didn't see that. I didn't get that. I didn't see that you called. Like, those are all easy ways to get away from talking to the person next to you. And it's, I love the conversation, and I like doing it in person, and I like talking. And so that's my fault is I don't do the conversation. Like, I don't follow through on my texts, and I'm like 4 days later, I'll get back to you at one point. But I think the thing about the barbecue that was so awesome is that everyone kind of talked. Everyone had a conversation. Everyone's human. We got to realize all of us are human and want to have talk. And we forget that sometimes. The church I grew up in and started in, like, our pastor you never talked to him. You never saw him. He just did service and disappeared. And, he would be in the front. And, like, that's one thing about La Casa. All of our pastors are so cool and so involved with, things. And they're you easily talk to them and easily have that conversation, and they're available, and I love that. That's one thing that drew me to La Casa. It's like all the pastors are great, and being here working with them, they all check in and want to know how people are doing, and I think that's amazing too. It's not just them being pastors; they're also part of the congregation. They're enjoying, seeing the growth and stuff. So tell me about your son.
Oh gosh, he doesn't stop talking. We should have him on the show.
He's great.
Yeah. Well, his throat was hurting for a few days, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong. Like, we had the doctor look at him, and there's nothing wrong. Doctor's like, he's fine. His throat's not even red. And I take him to grandma's for a day, and she calls, and I'm like, how's his throat? And she's like, there's nothing wrong with it. He just won't stop talking. I think that's the problem. He's just constantly talking. So.
Yeah, he's cool. He was great. He was like him, my son, 8 years old, and they were just having a blast. And seeing him at church, and he comes up and talks, and then I load him up with root beer floats, and they're all happy. So it's cool to see the kids. It's cool to see the kids in church.
So speaking of kids, this is how I got my idea of kind of a topic that I'd like to discuss with you. I did see Ash. She was wearing an NSYNC shirt one day.
Yes.
Okay. And it set me off. I was so excited because I remember growing up when I was 13 or however old I was obsessed with NSYNC. I had Justin Timberlake all over my walls. You couldn't even see the wall. It was covered. And I ran into this interesting article that somebody wrote about an interview with this man named Burke Parsons, who was, I guess he was a former Backstreet Boy who actually rejected fame and fortune for Christ. And I thought it was pretty interesting. Really, what stood out to me is how somebody could be able to turn down that instant fame, that fortune, just to serve God,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we're called to do.
Yeah, it's a promise of something better. It's a humble or meek life, or keeping yourself in check. I think with celebrity stuff, it's really interesting because if they talk about their faith, they get judged, unless they're getting an award, and then they can thank God or their honesty. But if they talk about their faith, that they go to church, or something similar to that, was like Chris Pratt was attending a church, and people were mad at him because of the opinions of the church. And so it's like he said, it's like, this is my congregation, this is my house of worship, this is where I want to be. And it's to see someone that can reject a lifestyle or a fame or money or trade that in. It's a lot of respect, and I always think that if you can't use that as your stage to present your faith, then you don't belong there. And so whatever you're doing should reflect your faith, because you are a representative of Christ. You're a representative of the church even, and it's from an idea of just working at a church. You don't want to be the guy that's on the highway losing their temper or that, and then they're like, oh, that's a guy from La Casa, and he's not being too nice right now. So I think that it's I love seeing people do that, and to recognize the fact that the lifestyle they were walking into probably wasn't going to keep them on the right path. Respect that a lot. I like it when they still have their path and they're not afraid to share their faith too. You don't have to ride out what everyone else is doing. And it's probably really hard to avoid that temptation. But if you can be in that world and still have your faith and still reflect it and be kind of your light to the world, as we did in Pentecost, and showing that's an interesting way. But it's hard because you don't want to put yourself in circumstances when you're surrounded by that temptation. That's the challenge. Where is your balance? Do you have a good life, or do you have a good life with Christ? And that's a hard design to figure out, because you can say you're doing all right, but it's how you actions and you live and what you do and how you're recognized through that.
Well, here's my question, because part of the reason that he turned it down was because he really struggled with the fact that he couldn't he couldn't sing those Les Phil songs,
Exactly.
all of those, and serve God at the same time. You can't serve the world and God at the same time. How do you, I mean, how can you see somebody doing both?
It's picking. I always think it's picking your battles and picking what you're going after. If music's a tough one, because if someone's writing something for you to say and you don't believe or mean it, you're just doing it to say it, or you're just doing it for fame or money, or I don't know what that would be. But it would, you can't have a lifestyle that is full of something bad and still say, well, I'm doing all right, because you're reflected by that. And you'd have to walk away from something like that, or you'd have to stand firm to your beliefs and say, all right, that's fine. And that's where we get stuck right now in the world, is like, I don't believe that is okay. And then the attack back is, well, you have to believe that's okay because everyone else believes it's okay, so you need to follow that. So, and without getting deep into really where you can kind of bounce on the offensive. But I would say, if I say I don't like cheeseburgers and everyone in the room likes cheeseburgers, I'm the odd one out. And anger people with your lack of cheeseburger loving. And it's weird, because your opinion, and when it comes to church, like, if you have a line that you've drawn, and this is what I believe in and this is what I don't, here's where I stand, here's where I don't, and someone doesn't agree with you, you can be looked down as the bad one. But if you can stand up for yourself, you kind of just got to take that burden. And we get back to like the bearing your burdens. You got to take that, and you can't avoid. Like I always say, I tell my kids, don't lie. Like, please don't lie. But then I started changing it to like, try to tell me the truth instead of making it so negative and be like, stop lying. You give me truth. Like, just tell me the truth. And that's where I always try to start people when they struggle with things, or like any type of lifestyle, any type of job, or whatever you're doing. You know, make sure you're truthful, you're honorable, you're doing really good at what you're doing. Someone's reflective of positive. If he could put himself in a situation where he could have been the positive for something without sacrificing his morals or beliefs, go for it. But that's a choice you kind of have to make, I guess. And it's weird because I wonder how he feels now. If he still has that reflection of like, yeah, we're good, and they've made it, and he's probably seen a lot of them fall apart too. And it would be interesting to see kind of his day-to-day journey of where this took him. That had to be 20 years ago almost.
Yes, this was 20 years ago. One of the things that really stood out to me also in the story was that his mom and a lot of other Christian people in his life were all about it. They couldn't understand why he would say no to this opportunity. His mom was completely just excited for this, and a lot of Christians around him were saying, this is a door that God is opening for you, and you're not taking advantage of it. And learning to decipher between, is this really a door being opened by God, or is this a temptation?
Yes. And that's actually a really good point, because how you got to relate that is, and that's I probably catch myself a lot telling people that, well, this is your opportunity, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's just an opportunity in general. It's not an opportunity to share your faith. It's not an opportunity to show your worth or value. It could just be a stepping stone. And Christians are not infallible to using that sometimes, and they're not. Not everything that we do is it's by our own fault. Not everything that we do is in perfect harmony with what God wants us to do. Anything from, how we, spend money, live our lives, make money, treat people, treat kids, anything like that. We always have our fault. To recognize that, and also to tell the people that are pushing him forward, this is probably not my place. That has to be a challenge. Mm-hmm. And that has to be someplace where you have to go. And so when you look at that as just, I'm just an average, D-average high school student. I don't have any, super high qualities in education or anything like that. But when I look at things like that, it's like, how do you recognize your path? How do you start to feel like you're getting on the right path, or you might be going off the wrong path?
That's why the word is so important. Making sure you're really reading the Bible, making sure you're staying true to that. Arm yourself. And really take the time to listen. Talk to God.
So let's talk about that for a second. Talking to God. Give me examples of talking to God. I always love hearing people's theory on this, because I love what people do when they talk to God, or how they function. So where does yours go?
Personally, I talk to God through prayer. Just throughout the day. And that's something for you and I. Like, I know you've come over with your family, and we've all had dinner together, and that's not something that we always do. Is we don't always take the time and just pray right before we eat.
Yeah.
You probably noticed that, and that's because I find myself praying just throughout the day, but I don't never really sit down and try to. I guess I just never grew up with that, so it never was something in my family.
Didn't have prayer time or meditation time.
Exactly. I never really had that. Okay, this is just the specific time right before you eat, you pray. Yep. I'll take a look at it as throughout the day, and I need to maybe
it's conversation.
Yeah,
your dialogue with God.
Mm-hmm.
Prayer is a great way, and prayer's not. I always say, I love the Our Father, and you sent me an article about that too, which is interesting. But what I liked about the Our Father, it kind of gives you examples of where you go in your talk, in your conversation. And if you break that down line by line, it's such a cool design. I always look at like reflecting on prayer or reflecting on scripture. I do it. I try to set a time, and I wake up early. I'm up ridiculously early, and I do a little bit of reading and a little bit of that. But a lot of times, like when I'm working out, or like when like, my brain's in a different place, it's shutting off. It's tired. It's fatigued, and that's when I kind of have my like, where are we going? What are we doing? Hi, God. What's your plan? And it's a thought process for me, and I always like to think about what I'm trying to talk to him about. It's not always asking for something. It's kind of like, well, how's things going with you? And where's, like, that's my conversation with God, is a conversation. I think that it's hard because a lot of families structure prayer in, and we didn't really have that either. I kind of learned more about prayer when I started going to more of an evangelical church, and they had prayer meetings, and I went to one, and I didn't know what to expect. And that's when I kind of learned what prayer was, and it was this silent conversation with God, and it was this specifically designed silence that's created. And I started re-understanding silence when I started doing yoga with my daughter, and like there's no better silence than when your body's twisted into a weird form and you're just trying not to fall down, and you're like, your brain starts to function, and it's like, wow, I could see why people get really deep into like this, and they get meditative in their practice.
Well, that's a whole nother topic, because there's a lot of Christians too that would say that don't do yoga because it is,
so. And that's weird, because you got to draw the line on what you function it as. Like, is it exercise? Is it a belief? Is it, for us, it's exercise. It's this really crazy way to get our brain to attach to our body. And the only thing that sold me on it was the fact that I was really, really bad at it, and I hated being bad at things. So I'm like, I'm bad at this. I'm going to get better. I'm going to show up every day. And so I did. And there was like everyone from 20-year-olds to 85-year-old women that were just like killing me in yoga classes, and I was like, I'm not going to stop. But it is that's a good design into the world, is like, what is okay, what isn't okay, how is music viewed, how is movies viewed, how is everything viewed. It's weird.
Well, it's good to analyze that, because we can't run around with rose-colored glasses all the time. It's important to take all of that in consideration. We talk about that. It's a battle. It's a spiritual battle for our souls. And something that we might think is trivial really isn't, or might not be.
Yeah.
So, that's the whole point of studying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Equipping yourself for the world. Equipping your kids, too. This is to not offend anybody, but someone said, well, if you want to protect your kids and keep them safe from the world, you homeschool them. And I said, but no. I want them to be able to experience the world in their own way, but also to be strong enough to make the right decisions. So I try to equip them from everything from being nice, just be a good person first. Start with that. And the discussion came to the point where I said, well, I want my kids to share their life and their faith and not be afraid to. So I don't want them to be hiding and being protected. I want them to get out there and kind of be like, oh, Dad, your son's different, your daughter's different, because they're nice or good, but they go to church. They have a little background there, and maybe we should see what that could do for us. They're kind of the vessel to share to the world. And if you kind of hide yourself from the world, you're not sharing what you have. You're going to be faulted when you're out there. You're in the world. The world's not a cool, nice, easy place sometimes, and you find yourself in situations.
I tend to disagree with you on that, respectfully.
No, that's okay.
I am all about homeschool. I would love, if I could homeschool my son, I would absolutely homeschool him. And I get what you're saying about, you can't completely guard your children from the world. You have to throw them out there, prepare them for the world, because that is out there. But at the same time, our children really, when they're young, they are vulnerable. And until they're fully equipped, if we just send our children out there into the world like that, that's when things could get
Yeah, and it's hard to teach a 5-year-old, like is your son. It's hard to teach him that, well, this is the right and the wrong, and don't get involved in this and stay with it. That's a very struggling situation. And Stacy was a teacher. Homeschool would be great, but for us, it would be a challenge, and I would like to see them out in the world too, prepared. But yeah, we have a 12-year-old that we already deal with little things here and there, and it's, my reaction as the dad that I am is like, solve it, get her out of it, don't let her be around it. And I've had to learn to be like, or teacher, and that's a hard one. As teacher, hopefully it sticks. Hopefully the mentoring process, or the teachers, or the godparents, or the people in the church are going to give her support. She'll look up to you. She'll look up to people. So I'm hoping that that's part of this, and that's part of my prayer with them. But no, it would be great to protect them. But I think you're,
and not just protect, but to really educate.
And I think that's where I agree with anyone. At one point, they're going to get out there.
Yeah.
Whether it's in public school, in kindergarten, or if it's college, at one point they're going to get past, and they're going to have to sit there and get dropped off in that real world.
I think it's important to go over the tough questions with them.
Mm-hmm. Have them learn from you, not someone else.
Exactly.
Or have them learn it in your words and not someone else's, because that's a big challenge.
Yeah, especially they're going to go out there and they're going to get, especially as Christians, they're going to get a lot of questions. And if they don't know the answers to those questions themselves, then they're going to start questioning.
Oh, yeah.
Everything that you've ever taught them. Mm-hmm. So it's important that they, sit down, do Bible study from a young age.
Yep. You equip them. I love the word. Yeah, I like what you said with that too. You equip them.
Yeah.
Bible study. You pray. You teach. You.
Yeah. And
empower.
Homeschool. Even if you can't homeschool, you could still, take the role of equipping and educating your children.
I think that's our mentality. Is what we want to do. We want to equip them, because we're not going to homeschool them, and they're going to have to be out there. And so it's like we used to have this thing when I dropped them off at school. I used to tell my daughter, make good choices. Mm-hmm. Well, that was like the thing I always left her with. I was like, make good choices. And we'd get home and how'd it go? I mean, I did all right. It was a good day. So that was always good. It was good to have that. And I think that parenting kids right now is crazy hard, and it's a different world, and we have different things we have to deal with. But it's not much different. Like the instinct, sure. Like my daughter was. It's funny because I think about my mom when I was in school. Mine was later because I didn't really get into my own music and stuff till I was in high school, and my mom hated my music, and then my mom thought everything was bad, and then now it's like I think my mom hears music now and she's, it wasn't that bad. It's definitely changed a lot. So. And with having a 12-year-old daughter, and you try to listen to the music, and you're like, oh, wow, that's something different. So, do I tell her that that's not what it's so hard to judge on what you want to introduce and how you want to hide things, because it's the culture's easily delivered now. They have phones. It's not, my mom would be like, you can't listen to that, turn it off. No, it was off. Now they go to school, the kids have phones. They're listening to music at lunch. I went to lunch at my daughter's school, and everyone had phones. And the minute that they got to the lunch table, all their phones came out, and it was either they were on social media or they were listening to music. It's hard to control that flow, and it's hard to so we try to explain to her not all this is good. Mm-mm. Try to if you have questions, ask us, and there's going to be stuff that's going to be thrown in there, and try not to listen to really negative or stuff that's going to affect your life. And
kids are so impressionable nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's younger. It's hit him younger. My son, son's 8, and he picks up on these new songs. And, yeah, we've heard Old Town Road 900 times at our house. It's nonstop. It's just these things hit. And then, video games with, boys are different. Boys are video games and YouTube and videos. And, my daughter's more social and texting and music, and it's weird, and so I can see where she jumps into bullying more, because I think girls are susceptible to that bullying earlier in life and more of that social acceptance. I think the boys are just still kind of being boys and bros, and they're just watching their videos and stuff, and they're playing their video games. And I think the girls are looking for the acceptance at a younger age. And a lot of that's coming in the form of our media and our phones and our connection to that.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And it's interesting to see that. We've tried to keep that out. But we know it's all part of life. It's all going to happen. And it's different. And then, as men grow up, boys grow into men, I think it shifts. And then they hit a burden. Mm-hmm. And then they're struggling. And they're trying to find themselves in a society that's not accepting to being manly and being masculine, and where that's going right now is interesting.
Oh goodness, yeah. And there's so much out there. It's not just school or anything with the media that we have to protect our children against. There's so much more with porn and everything. I read something months ago saying that the average child will view their first porn-related thing on the internet in kindergarten. I couldn't even believe myself. It's like kindergarten? Yep. I mean, I remember when I was going to school, we didn't have computers and we had like one computer class and that was it. But now, like, he's in kindergarten and they have computers. They have tablets. They have
in their class.
I was like, what?
Wi-Fi in their school. My daughter has Wi-Fi. Like, she was telling me that. And she's going into 6th grade. We have Wi-Fi. Why do you have Wi-Fi? Well, for our tablets. I'm like, well, you're on it with your phone. Like, that's crazy. And it's everything's easily available. There's no challenge to get to it. I met with a counselor to talk about what we do with people who have like those types of addictions, and the percentages were through the roof. Men, women, everybody has access, and accessibility is there now. Yeah. Pornography is accessible to anyone. It's not like the old days. And that's what he was telling us. It's easily hidden. It's easy on everything that you go. And we are confronted with that daily. Like, as you look at your kids and see that this stuff's just going to be downloaded in their brain. And you got to teach them to stay away. And I think that's what, I think boys go directly into that. Like, that's what they're going to look at. You're going to give them a phone. They're going to be like, oh, wow, look at this. And it's just shared with look what I saw.
It's curiosity.
It's curiosity. It's a rebel mentality a little bit, and it's taboo to them, so why not? And teaching them to not do that is what we're tasked to do. And, not creating an addiction to that, because it becomes that. It becomes something that takes over your life. Yeah. And open conversation about that, I think it's shameful, and so you don't want to conversate about it. And what happens with men more, and this is my opinion, but just because I am one and I'm around them a lot, it takes a long time to get into a conversation where you're comfortable. I think, and I'm totally like swinging for the fences, I'm probably wrong, but I think women get into those types of conversations easier because there's not a reserve as much as losing their strength or being judged, or like when men get into that point, I feel like it's a weakness. And a lot of the responses I get when I invite guys out for a men's night or something is that I didn't know how this was going to be. I didn't know what it would be like. I didn't know what the conversations would be. It's always like an uncomfortable, like, oh, well, once I got there, we were okay. Do you see a difference between how men and women kind of open up about those things?
I personally, I don't know. My son is 5, so I haven't thought too much about that right now as to how I'm going to talk to him about that. I plan on, and I could see your point. I absolutely agree. It's something that people don't want to. You either look at it as a very shameful thing, so you don't want to. Admit something. It's hard to come out with I have sinned.
Now,
or you're on the other side going, oh, it's no big deal, and making light of the situation, discounting it. Yeah. So it's going to be one or the other. Like, what's the point, or not even want to talk about it type of thing, because it's really something that, for the most part, people hide. I'm sure if you ask the entire, church, the guys to stand up, but they say it's a high percentage. It's like 80, 90%.
So here's a good point to that. Like, they don't stand up. They won't say it.
They won't.
So
no.
Just take a 5-year-old mentality and say you're having a peer conversation with someone. Why do you think that's hidden so much in adult males? Even beyond just that temptation and just other things, like just opening up emotionally. I mean, men in my age, I'm 38. Our age group is getting hit hard with depression, anxiety, and suicide right now. I mean, men are at high levels of this right now. What do you think's causing that? In the fact that we're not opening up, what holds men back from doing that?
I'm not sure. I would probably say the fear of being judged. That's my only thing that I could say. I think as women, the only thing that we can do is, whether it's our sons or our husbands that are struggling with something like this, it's important to make it known that we're on the same team. It's not a wife versus husband on this topic.
It's wife and husband.
It's wife and husband against a sin. And working together, knowing that you can talk to each other. But I also think it's important, that's why men's group is so important, because I would hate to be, as a wife, I would hate to be my husband's police on this, because that's the last thing I want to do, is to monitor. I think it's important for men to come together and support each other. It might be easier to do it that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that showing weakness to anybody, and it's an wrong word, but the right word too. Alpha male situation is like, last thing you want to be is not the alpha male. And you don't want to show weakness. You don't want to show that you're broken. You don't want to show that you're falling apart. I know there's a lot of groups that always say that, we're all broken. But to admit it and to show it and to be the weak one of the crowd is, I think it's a huge thing that affects.
Huge. There's a lot of fear involved in that.
Oh, fear is a good word. That's a
fear.
Great word.
Absolutely. And and we just need to remember, I think that the only thing that will break that is to remember that we're on the same team. It's a spiritual battle.
And I like the we. The we is cool because it's not just husband, wife. It's not just family. Sometimes it is reaching out. I love accountability. I don't know if Chris told you, but I text the guys once a week if I remember to text the guys. Then I just don't text them back afterwards. But I have a group of guys. It's probably up to 30 guys. I send a text out once a week, but they're all individuals, not a group text. It's specifically written for each guy. I look at their name. I see who it is. And I send out, hey, how's it going? How's work? How's the kids? I try to remember what happened last conversation. Because I want someone to do that with me, too. I want someone to check in on me. I want to check in on them. These guys are part of my life. They become part of my life. Congregations become part of my life. And I think we've got away from that. We've lacked that. It's an insecurity. It's a fear. And we had to redevelop this village mentality and this culture, and we've become widespread, not like the old days where we were all grouped around one church and we were a small design and everyone met at the church. We're spread out across the valley, we're the country and everything, and if we're going to utilize our technology for something, I hope it's to check in and create that good conversation.
I agree. It's important. You mentioned depression with men too, and they say that a lot of men have a hard time building a strong bond with another man.
Just judgment.
And that's important. That's why the men's group is so important, to have somebody a friendship, not just a friendship, but somebody who's supportive and will hold you accountable if need be.
Yeah. And you have to have someone there for you. And they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be great. But they have to care. And that's a big part. And that's that love and that care and that compassion has to exist. And that's one thing is, even beyond each individual guy, I care about guys in general because I want us to all do good by each other. Like when the water comes up, I want us to all go up with the water. Like I want us to be good. Don't want anyone to be left behind. And I think they're kind of it's developing itself, and everyone's kind of caring about themselves a little bit more. And I like seeing what the group has grown to and loosened up and had conversation. And I've become great friends with everyone in the group. It's cool. And obviously the families now. So, yeah, depression is huge with guys. There's a lot of issues that lie on that. There's a lot of social issues. There's a lot of you can't be the strongest one in the room anymore because then you're looked upon as something different. And I know that gets into like a whole different bag of worms, but it's like if you're too strong or you're too masculine, then you're repressing people. And if you're not masculine enough, you're a wimp. I remember the phrase used to be like, you gotta man up. That was always what they say, man up. And now it's like, can't say that anymore because that's not a good thing to say. So it's so hard because then, like I said, raising boys is like, how do you... We were looking for books for boys, specifically written to empower boys, and we found one series, which I'll probably get your son, and it's an amazing series, and it's written by a Navy SEAL. And,
That'd be awesome.
And it's how to handle life, and it was how to... You don't have to be the weakest one in the group. You can struggle and you can get stronger. Mm-hmm. You can defend yourself, but it was hard because there's a lot of books written for girls, and and there was nothing for boys out there, and it was hard. And look, it's really crazy, and that was back to like percentages. Like only 20% of men read. 20% of book sales is held by men. The rest is 80% women. Men spend time on YouTube. Men spend time, scrolling through stuff. We don't have that.
Even with audiobooks?
Yeah,
track that?
It's a conscious part of like you got to download the book, you got to have the book and read. And it's like my wife and I talked about that. Like reading isn't as cool as it used to be too. Like I don't know what happened to that, but I think it's because we have so much more distractions.
So much more distractions.
Yeah.
I think reading is awesome.
I think reading's great.
think it's really cool.
That's part of my morning ritual is get up and read. And I do. I read as much as I can, and I have Kindle on my phone, and I function on that. But even to the point of like men motivating them, there's zero. Well, I want to say zero. There's a small percentage of books that are written to support men and build up good men. And there's some good Christian books and there's some good Christian authors, but there's so much more for the women out there. And I remember going to Borders and Barnes and trying to find a couple books, and it was a struggle. A lot of that's probably because they're not going to read them, and that 20. But I think it's hard to get men to feel like they could be men, and that's a weird thing right now. It's weird to try to teach your son it's okay to be a little bit more masculine, and it's okay to do this and that. And so I think it comes back to having a strong male figure and then having a strong bond, and then you also have to have the breakdown of being humble enough, and the Bible uses the word meek, or I always use keep your sword sheathed and not always take your sword out and try to attack people. It's like keep calm. We have a balance, and you got to have a good balance nowadays. But never lose your ability to be a strong leader, a strong man, and empowering to everybody. And I think that's a good thing to do. So now let's see. Father's Day. Tell me about how Father's Day was.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah. You were at church. You were at service.
We were at church, yeah.
Had a picture of your husband and son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just love seeing that. I love seeing that so much. He's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
It's great.
So blessed.
I told someone the other day, we were serving root beer floats. We did like 600 root beer floats. It was awesome. And I told someone, I said, this is easy to do because we have such good dads in the church. We have a lot of dads it was great getting pictures. I couldn't use everyone's pictures. I ran out of space. Our slideshow was just great to have, and the having people kind of tear jerk a little bit with the slideshow, and then also laugh at some of the funny quotes and stuff, and seeing the pictures of just different families up there was awesome to do and awesome to see, and seeing pictures of our pastors up there with their family was cool. I love Father's Day. I think it's in such a weird time of the year because in summer, church attendance low, and we summer trip, all these things. So we kind of always gets looked over. So we want to focus a lot more on the dads every year and give them a reward for stepping up and doing what they're supposed to do, but also making them feel like they have that same value. And I loved it. I loved this slideshow. I was lucky. Like, I got to see my wife and my daughter sing on stage too, which was kind of cool. So that's my big gift, And
what'd you do?
I think I did the same thing every guy did. I grilled that day. Like, we joked and we're like, Mother's Day, let's go to a fancy restaurant, and it's like Father's Day, let's buy him a steak and make him grill his own dinner. But that's what I love to do. So my son and I cooked steak and had a good time. That was our day. Church, and that was a great thing. That was my big reward, was just being able to serve people, and just say thank you, from the men's group. Essentially, it was like, that's what we were all about, and not have any men working that day. We had no men. Every man who volunteered, I'm like, nah, this is your day.
Nice.
You relax.
Yeah.
Like, you take it easy. That's what I did. Yeah, it was an easy day. It was an easy weekend, and I got my kids made me like little plaques and stuff, and then the family got me float therapy, which I'm into all the weird like therapy stuff, like cryotherapy and yoga and gym, but float therapy. So basically, just go float in this tank for an hour.
Did you
I've done
use
it before.
Yeah?
No, I've done it before. It's super expensive and time consuming, and so I'm always like, I want to go back. It's really relaxing, and I have a lot of neck and spine problems, so like being weightless kind of takes the pressure off your spine. So that's kind of cool. So that was my big gift, and obviously being with the family was cool. So what'd you guys do?
We spent it with his father.
Yeah.
With his parents. It was nice to see them spending time together, grilling.
Yes.
A lot of grilling.
Like I said, I think every guy did that day.
Yeah. And it was fun for me just to wake up early, make him breakfast, just serve him, because I'm not always able to do that. So it made me happy to be able to do that. Right. It was really cool. It's
a good day to acknowledge and reward.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great day. And it was cool to see that. And like all the dads kind of had the same, this was a good day. And, I have some surprises for next year's Father's Day that I think is going to really hit off and affect everybody really good.
I'm excited.
I think it's good. Well, what do you got left? Any final thought? I want to hear.
I guess just the final thought, because you had asked, what had happened with that guy. You're curious to know, like, did he ever regret his decision about joining? Well, I know that a few years later, he had one last chance. The guy, Lou Pearlman or whatever his name was, that was putting the band together, called him back and said, okay, this is your last chance. We're putting together another group, which was In Sync, and offered him to be the first member of that group. And he decided to turn it down again.
And just never. So what did he do? What path did he take?
Well, one of the interesting things on there, he said that he noticed there was I believe it was Times. It was Backstreet Boys came out on the cover of a magazine, and it was like them with their pants down, and it had a Bible verse like right underneath that, and it really helped confirm that he made the right choice. And he really, looking back, I know a lot of those guys went through drug rehab. They struggled a lot. But the whole point of the article was the fact that he did not regret his decision to turn down fame and fortune to really serve God. And really now he's in line to take over, in line to be the pastor of a church.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. We've had that conversation. I've had it with Stacy of like, where's our path taking us? And like my example was like, I work in remodeling and doing construction for homes, and it was like, how much time is that taking? Obviously you have to work and make a living, but if your purpose is doing something else, and it was about the time when we were really trying to kick off the men's group and church and service, how much is that pulling me away from what I needed to be doing? And it was a big conversation, and some of it was like, these people are taking time out of their day to meet with me that are involved in the church, and I feel like that's where I need to invest. And things fell into place, and I ended up, my hours shifted, so I got off earlier so I could spend time doing stuff like this and delivering the message of what we're doing and meeting with the guys. And not, that's the one thing, is I always want to be available, and I've always had a function of like be always ready and available and somewhat useful, like wherever I go, try to have that going on. And then never make an excuse, try to always be there and do it, and if I can't do it, at least own it. And that's kind of how this all worked. It was taking the path and trusting that I would be put in the right spot. And it did. It worked out, and there was moments where I was like pulling my hair out and ready to give up. And now it's like, here we go. We're taking off. And, by next year this time, everything is going to be, working for God and delivering. And, the men are doing the work that they need to do. And they're talking to other men. And they're, selling their faith and their religion to the other guys. And they're that's amazing. And then, adding the podcast now and adding, we did the table talk at church. All these little things that we're adding is amazing to reach. So I use that as that was my thing of like, God has me in a path. And so just listening to his story and being like, well, you're going to run a church. That's your job. You're going to lead. So it's not always like, how long does it take? Well, Bible says 40 years sometimes. You might be walking for a while, and that's where we're at, Hopefully it didn't take us 40 years. The math doesn't add up, and I'm going to be tired. So, but we're getting there. I love it.
Yeah, what they say. So I'll leave with this this quote, and I'm interested to take this further and really talk about like celebrities some more that really, like Chris Pratt and things like that. That's really step out and talk about their faith. But because they are really, they're in the limelight. So when they do mess up, it's out there for everybody to see.
And they look for you to fall apart.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But Mark 8:35 says, "For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it."
Yeah. And you got to break that down. Like, what is the life? What is the life you're losing to the life you're gaining?
Well, in this guy's case,
his was fame, fortune, probably security your whole life, and I've talked to people on like a lot of different sides, and I read a lot of biographies from famous people, at a lot of sometimes rock stars, and sometimes even evangelical people. And one quote I got from a guy once was, "We all had the same start line, like we all were told, ready, set, go." And wherever we ended up is where we ended up. But we all started the same line at one point. Things happen, family, stuff like that. But we're gonna get it. But you choose where you're going, and what life are you giving up. And some of the most secure results are not the right choice.
Yeah. Or lead down the wrong path.
Yeah. It's easy to say, all right, well, we're going to give you this.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Yeah,
and that's
easy.
that temptation, And so I find something, like my advice always been to people is, even beyond church and all that, find something that you love, you're good at, focus on it, and use it. And then when you add the faith and you add that build, it all gets used. You get used in the right way. You can be used remodeling homes. You could be used working at a university. You could be used, I don't care where you're at. You could be a bistro at a coffee shop. It's all in value. And that's one thing with that Father's Day slideshow. We put all those careers up there. And those are all careers from people in our church. And there's beyond careers of that. Sometimes it's not 100% your value. Sometimes your value is your family, your faith, God, what you're doing for the people next to you. So I think it's great. I think it's good you sat down and talked, and I think we could probably talk about 10,000 other things. So.
We covered a lot.
And we'll do more, and I think it's great. You'll be on more often, and I'm excited to see what you do. And I'm thankful for your family, and the relationship we have with you guys.
We're thankful for you guys as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we'll do this again.
Thank you.
All right.